How are you? You well? Great to be here. Yeah,
Can we get
lots
your
to
reaction,
do.
first of all, to the ICC decision yesterday, and will that have any bearing on Ireland's recognition of the State of Palestine?
So it's not an ICC decision, but it's a move by the prosecutor, of course, to prosecute both Hamas and Netanyahu in certain circumstances. But of course, that's a move by the prosecutor. The independence of the court is what's important. So from an Irish perspective, we support the court. We help fund the court. We provide all of the we support the court, the independence of the court and its processes. But I recognise that he has done a very substantial body of work, and he has come to the conclusion to prosecute both sides of this ongoing conflict.
The fact that Joe Biden is very much against this move, and that he said that what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide?
I think what's important from an Irish perspective is our support for the independence of this court process. The court is going through its own process. Clearly, the prosecutor has made his determination, having done a substantial body of work. It's really important from my perspective and from an Irish perspective that we just allow the court to do any work that it wishes to do after this point.
Okay. Can I ask you what impact this might have on the timetable for Ireland and Spain and others possibly recognising the State of Palestine?
They're not connected matters. I mean, the question around Ireland recognising the State of Palestine is a much longer term project, recognising that we would like to see a political solution in the medium and long term, which we believe is the only resolution to this conflict. Of course, it's not the first time that this concept has been discussed before, going back for many, many years, back in 1948, 67, the Oslo Accords, the two-state solution has always been the dream, has always been the objective. And I think the paths to date haven't worked, and Ireland, along with others, would like to take a more substantive step towards a genuine political process that has a two-state solution, which of course requires two states recognition. So I don't think the two are connected, and I don't believe they'll impact each other in any way.
And any update on when it might happen?
Well, I mean, the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have been very clear that it's very soon, very imminent, and that it would be this month. So whether it's today, tomorrow, or this day next week, really what's important is the substance of what we're trying to do here. What we have been trying to do all along is coordinate as best we can with other countries who would take a similar view, and recognising their domestic political processes may be different to ours, their domestic sensitivities and their timings may be different to ours, to coordinate as best we can. And the reason that we want to do that is we'd like to have make the biggest statement possible in relation to it, rather than it being ad hoc or piecemeal. So I would say it will be very, very soon, but I can't give you an update beyond that.
Minister, in relation to domestic politics and kind of the campaigns at home, we've seen a lot of kind of videos on social media of people being harassed, putting up posters and stuff like that, and that is probably only a fraction of what we're seeing. I mean, how kind of concerning is that the real toxicity in politics?
Well, look, it is extremely concerning. On the other hand, my experience yesterday, I was in Shankill, I was in Dalkey, and I was in Cabinteely, was exceptionally positive, with one exception, universally, polite, neutral, positive, engaged, just a very normal, good political process. So that was my evidence yesterday. But I do recognise that the difficulties that my party colleagues and other political representatives are facing all over the country. There is an increased toxicity in politics. It is being fuelled and amplified by social media. The very small number of events that are taking place, all of which are unacceptable, are becoming much bigger because of social media, and social media is fueling it itself. That's one of the reasons that we're having a conversation today around election interference, which I think is very important. There is a statement being developed that we would very much like to participate in and support. There is a little bit of work to do on the language. It just came out at the weekend, and there's just a little bit of work to do on the language. So I hope that we will get there today in that. But if we don't, we will align ourselves with it very shortly. So it's a very, very important issue for the European elections right across Europe. But as you say, at a domestic level, whether it's a council election or a European election, it is an issue in Ireland, and we have to protect our democratic process. That's the whole point of what we do here, week in, week out. It is about democratic project. It is about protecting individual and human rights on the basis of a democratic, stable political system, and it's under threat in different and new ways, and it's very important that we double down on all of the protections of our democratic processes now.
On Ukraine, the preparations for the next summit, there has been talk that the EU might be ready to start formal accession talks. Where does Ireland stand on that? Do you think that's likely?
I hope so. I mean, what we would like to see is the beginning of that process at the Council meeting at the end of June. We'd very much like to see that, during the Belgian presidency. I think it's a very important statement. Ireland has been one of the earliest supporters of Ukrainian and indeed Moldovan accession, and we would like to see that happen as soon as possible. So, I mean, there's quite a body of work to do over the next number of weeks to get to that point, but Ireland is absolutely firmly behind that. This is a war about a way of life. This is a war about values, democratic or otherwise, free and fair elections or otherwise. We would like Ukraine and Moldova, but particularly, obviously, Ukraine, given the particular situation that it's in, to be in these talks as early as possible, and Ireland is fully behind that. We had breakfast this morning, I just got the end of it, with representatives from Moldova, offering them further and better support. They really are putting through an enormous package of reforms against a very difficult backdrop of just internal domestic challenges, some historical organised crime and so on, and but they are doing phenomenal work, and we would like to see that rewarded with early accession.
Question of money, can I just check with you? So there's a G7 finance ministers meeting this week. My understanding is that the US is really pushing the EU to do more on using the profits from immobilised Russian assets to help Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky was out at the weekend asking for more aid, more EU involvement in the war. Where does Ireland stand on that? Are we ready to step up? Are we ready to create another budget line for Ukraine, more money?
Well, there's the two slightly different questions. Obviously, the profits of the immobilised assets is something that we've been talking about, and what's the morality around that, and how to do that. Obviously, there's a slightly different perspective emerging in the G7, which is that this is the recovery fund. We have to think about our own rule of law processes and our own standards. Are we happy to simply, take that money and use it in ways that, that is not resolved yet? But as you know, Ireland has been at the front of trying to provide support in the ways that it can, recognising obviously our contribution towards the military side is slightly different, but there is going to be an enormous body of work to do with support, not just supporting Ukraine now, but reconstruction in the future, and we've tried to be at the front of that in every way that we can so far.
Sorry, what's your reaction to the ICC seeking possible arrest warrants for Israeli officials?
Well, what I noted was that the prosecution is looking for arrest warrants for Hamas leaders and also Israel, and what we've said in Ireland is that we are just allow the court to take its process separate to the work of the prosecutor. He clearly has done an enormous body of work behind to get to this point, and I note that he is taking a decision on both sides of this conflict with Netanyahu and indeed in the Hamas leadership, but we support the independence of the court at all times and would just allow it to do its processes. Okay?
Super, thanks, Mr.
Thanks so much.